Is UNLV going to have to fire Josh Pastner after one season? What's up? This is Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff, and on today's show, UNLV might need a new basketball coach soon. The A's might need a new nickname. The Raiders, who do need a new head coach, are interviewing candidates, and the Golden Knights won a game in overtime. UNLV lost so badly last night, I had to change the order of my show today. I was planning on starting with the Golden Knights. They won a game. And then UNLV lost by 32 to Wyoming. Here we go. 32 points to Wyoming. Wyoming played a Division II school called Northern State earlier this year. They didn't even win that game by 32 points. UNLV was atrocious in this one. They made 56% of their free throws. They were 11 of 27 on layups and dunks. They allowed Wyoming to score 1.4 points per possession. Wyoming, in 3 Mountain West games prior to this, had not scored over 1 point per possession. And it was over from the start. I mean, this game was 10-2, and then it was 20-5, like 7 minutes in. It was just over. And what has happened this season is kind of unbelievable. There have been 4 inexcusable losses in Josh Pastner's first season. They lose at home to UT Martin, who's 220 in KenPom. They lost at home to Montana, who's a little bit better. I think they're in the 180s in KenPom. They lost a game in Henderson to Tennessee State, who's worse than those other 2 teams. And then whatever the hell that game was against Wyoming, they were not supposed to beat Wyoming, but they weren't supposed to lose by 32. And so what we've seen is 14 games this year under Josh Pastner. 4 of them have just been unacceptable. Like 4 of them are horrendous games. And UNLV has had some bad injury luck this season, right? Miles Che is not going to play a single game for UNLV this year. Maybe he was going to be their best player. Ladji Dembele's out for the rest of the year as well. They've had other guys in and out of the lineup because of injury with shorter-term injuries. And injuries are a valid excuse for why this team is not in an NCAA tournament hunt or even near the top of the Mountain West. Those are fine reasons, right? That's perfectly valid reasons to not be at the NCAA tournament level. But these injuries are not an excuse to lose to Wyoming by 32 points. It's not an excuse to lose to Tennessee State, UT Martin, and Montana State, right? Like, that's not what's happening here. You should not be pointing to, well, we don't have Miles Che as to why 4 of your 14 games have just been pathetic, right? Like these types of games will happen to an average Mountain West team. You will lose a game to a UT Martin. You will get blown out by another Mountain West opponent, but not 4 times in 14 games. That's the part that's really sticking out to me, is the amount of times we've seen it in such a short period of time for UNLV under Josh Pastner. Again, bad losses happen, but we've seen 4 of these in 14 games. And by the way, that doesn't even include what they did in the Players Era tournament, where, again, injuries, it's a valid excuse, but they were bad in that tournament too. What, they played like 1 good half against Maryland to point back to? Like, this has not been a good basketball team for a long time under Josh Pastner, and we've only seen 14 games. I think it's a huge problem. And by the way, shout out to Brain Carter on Twitter, who asked me about, like, who's the worst UNLV team of all time. By KenPom, which goes back to 1997, it was the Marvin Menzies first-year team. They were 248 in KenPom that year. Basketball Reference also has a simple rating system, and they also have that Marvin Menzies team is the worst ever, and Basketball Reference goes through all UNLV teams of all time. Quick side note, if you don't remember, Marvin Menzies did get screwed, right? As critical as I was of the Marvin Menzies era, he got screwed, right? Chris Beard takes the UNLV job, does the press conference. 9 days later, he's gone for Texas Tech. And then UNLV has to scramble. They get Marvin Menzies as a new coach, but he comes in so late that it's so hard to create a roster. He had no shot at putting together a good roster. The current UNLV team is not very close to that one. According to Basketball Reference, 11th worst UNLV team of all time. At least I should say that was going into last night. I haven't checked to see if they've updated it yet because it might be worse. Ken Pom there at 149. So almost 100 spots higher than what the Marvin Menzies team was. But the important note here is that UNLV fans are watching this UNLV team and they're being reminded of the worst UNLV team of all time. The fact that it's even a question is insane, and it's emblematic of how bad this situation is for UNLV and Josh Pastner. And this is the thing for me with basketball. Hell, we see it in football now too. You should be able to turn programs around quickly with the transfer portal. Barry Odom did it with the football program, not basketball, football. And I go back, it's something Desiree Reed-Francois said years ago when talking about hiring a basketball versus hiring a football coach. And she basically compared it to boats and like turning around a speedboat versus turning around like a cruise ship. Basketball's the speedboat. You should be able to turn this around because guess what? You go out and you find like 3 good players, you're going to be at the top of the Mountain West if you get 3 good players. And the fact that Pastner's this bad in year 1 means he's got really 1 year left to prove he can do it. Because if you can't do it within 2 years, you're probably never going to be able to do it. Like why would we think it would be different after 2 years? And honestly, is it going to be different after 1 year? Like, is Pastner going to be better at this upcoming offseason? Because part of the benefit of going into a year 2, or what should be the benefit, is that you have players coming back. You have some holdovers. You have some roster retention. Is that going to happen? And if it does, are they good players? Because how many of these players do you want to come back? And some of them are seniors, right? Kamani Hamilton's a senior. So even if you wanted some back, you might not get them. So the reality is that UNLV is going to go in the next season with 7, 8, 9 new players, right? Can Pastner build a roster that's worthy of the NCAA tournament next offseason after we just saw him fail to do it this past offseason? Now, we'll get to the roster here because it ties into what exactly happened in this game. Big part of UNLV's issue is the lack of shooting and spacing. I've talked about it for a couple of weeks. They've played some really bad teams, and it hasn't hurt them yet. But Pastner has used a new starting lineup. That was the 4th game in a row he's used that starting lineup. I don't think we're going to see it again. But the new starting lineup has 3 guys that don't shoot or can't shoot in it. Kamani Hamilton, Tyron Jones, and Jacob Benarbi. That's 3. Basically, it's 3 post players that don't shoot threes or can't shoot threes. And so Wyoming on defense just didn't guard those guys when they were outside the paint. If they were on the perimeter without the ball, defenders just stayed in the paint, just hung out with a foot in the paint, sometimes 2 feet in the paint, waiting to stop a drive or contest a shot at the rim, whatever it was, from somebody else. And that defensive strategy will work against that lineup because there are 3 non-shooters on the floor. All you have to do is clog up the lane, and UNLV's 2 best offensive players, Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn and Kamani Hamilton, when are they at their best? When they dribble the ball into the paint. Well, if all of a sudden Tyron Jones's man and Jacob Benarbi's man are just hanging out in the paint, well, then what are they going to do? They're going to have to score through 3 guys. And we saw some of that last night. UNLV struggled to finish at the rim. They did get fouled a lot, but it was just a disaster because of the way Wyoming guarded them. And Wyoming can guard you like that because UNLV doesn't have any shooting. And one of the best examples, I think, of how bad this was and the players maybe not understanding it, but having to try to fix it on the fly. UNLV had Emmanuel Steffen, their 7-foot center who comes off the bench. He was posting up, and Tyron Jones was in the corner, and his man was just in the paint. So there wasn't really a good way to throw the ball into Emmanuel Steffen because there's 2 defenders just hanging out there. Well, Tyron Jones, who doesn't shoot threes, was like, well, I'm going to go post up too. I need to try to solve this. So then UNLV had 2 guys trying to post up within 3 feet of each other. Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn tried to throw the post entry pass to Tyron Jones, and it got stolen. You've got a lineup where multiple players are only good when they get the ball near the rim. That's what they're putting on the floor over and over and over. And if you're going to have three guys that cannot shoot, it's not going to work. You're not going to have good offense because defenses are just going to be able to clog the paint. Also problematic, very problematic in this game, Jacob Benarby. Just all-time bad game, right? He's one of the issues with spacing and not being able to shoot. But on top of that, he couldn't guard anybody, not a single person for Wyoming. Wyoming just kept putting him in ball screen after ball screen after ball screen, and he was slow and flat-footed and just non-reactive to every ball screen that Wyoming was just getting good look at the rim after good look at the rim. Just over and over. There was even a play where Wyoming ran something a little more complex than just a ball screen. They had three guys involved with a little two ball screens and a screen-to-screener action. And UNLV just switched all of it. They had three defenders. They just switched all of it. And so what it meant was Jacob Benarby ended up on Wyoming's best player, who's a guard, who just drifted out to the corner on the three-point line while Benarby just forgot about him. Just lost him, forgot, and then Wyoming just one pass over to the corner, best player gets a wide open three, and Benarby's late to close out. You could even hear on the broadcast somebody on the UNLV bench yelling JB because they knew he was supposed to be in the corner guarding that guy, but Benarby did not. Horrendous game from Jacob Benarby, and if that's how he plays defense, he's unplayable. And we saw that because he got benched in the second half. They started Emmanuel Steffen over Jacob Benarby. Now, Emmanuel Steffen fouled out with 12 minutes to go in the game, so Benarby still played quite a bit in the second half. But if that's how he's going to play defense, he can't play. Like, it's just, like, it can't happen. He hasn't played that poorly defensively before that game, so I think there's some hope as to why, or as to him getting better or not being that bad. But if that's how he's going to play defense, he's unplayable. And he was unplayable last night. It's a big reason why UNLV got absolutely smoked. Now, on the sort of big picture and the shooting, Josh Pastner didn't recruit a roster that shoots good enough. And this is why I think he deserves some blame, significant blame, even with the injuries, and also the pessimism going into next season. He did not build a roster of shooters. And just last week, he talked to the media and he brought up, like, well, we don't have Miles Che, we don't have Ladji Dembele, and they're both going to be out for the year, and those would have been our two best shooters. Miles Che, yeah, shot over 40% last year, shot a high volume. It hurts. Ladji Dembele's taken less than 73s in his college career and made 35%, which a center that shoots a three once a game at 35% has some value. But to say something to the effect of, well, we lost one of our best shooters when it's 35% on a very, very low volume at Iowa, I'm not buying that one. And ultimately, when I talk about not having shooting, I'm not talking about, oh, well, they had one or two guys that were good shooters. They just either don't get to play, Al Green, or they're just hurt. No. Shooting should be the entire roster. Shooting should be almost everybody on the team. Because again, what does UNLV run into? They're putting out lineups with three guys that cannot shoot. And by the way, those lineups include Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn, who's a bad shooter before this year. He's shooting a lot better this season, but we could very easily be saying UNLV has lineups with four non-shooters on the floor because Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn, their best offensive playmaker, he's not been a shooter in his career either. So the idea that one or two injuries has prevented them from being a good shooting team is laughable because this is just a bad shooting roster. Top to bottom, it's not a roster that prioritized shooting. And it's happened over and over with UNLV coaches. Like, again, the last time they were top 100 in three-point shooting in the country was 2011, 2012. That was under Dave Rice. Coach after coach since then has just not prioritized shooting. It's insane that it's happened. And my theory on this is that UNLV as a program is not good enough to land the best players in the country, right? That's obvious. And so what it means is when they're adding players to the roster, you have to take guys with flaws. And the better overall basketball players that UNLV can land are the ones that are poor shooters. Because if they were good shooters and as good as they were at everything else, they'd be going to a better school than UNLV. That's my theory on this. I think Drake Gibbs-Lawhorn is a great example because Drake Gibbs-Lawhorn's a good basketball player. And very important to UNLV because they need at least one guy that can handle the ball. But he's a very good basketball player. His biggest deficiency is that his three-point shooting in his career is below 30%. And so if I'm building a basketball team, I want somebody like Drake Gibbs-Lawhorn on my team if he's able to shoot like 35% from three. If he's only going to shoot 29%, a shooting guard who might play some point guard that shoots 29% from three, I just can't have that on my roster. I just can't do that. And so I think that's my theory on this, is that UNLV is able to get pretty good basketball players to come here. They just have a flaw that has scared other teams off. And that flaw always is shooting, because if they could shoot, they'd be on other teams. So disaster of a game last night for UNLV. It doesn't change anything from the standpoint of like going to the NCAA tournament. It might change Mountain West seeding in the tournament, Mountain West tournament anyways. But like, it doesn't change their NCAA tournament hope because they don't exist. And all that matters is, are they going to win 4 games in 4 days in the Mountain West tournament, right? Like that's the only thing that matters for the NCAA tournament. But if you're trying to evaluate this season and evaluate this coach on what you expect in the future, that's a pretty damning game and a pretty important game to figuring out, because that just should not happen. You should not be going to Wyoming and losing by 32. It should not happen. It's the biggest loss UNLV's ever had to Wyoming. Like it's just not an acceptable result in a season where we've already had 4 unacceptable results. And so what does it mean for the future of Josh Pastner? They're not going to fire him after one season. You shouldn't be firing him after one season. Like you should be, if you hired a coach less than a year ago and you believed in it, you shouldn't be letting 14 games be like, all right, we got to get rid of this guy now. But after 2 years, I mean, can UNLV afford to fire Josh Pastner after 2 years? I don't know. Maybe not. They getting that money from the Pac-12 anytime soon? But it's just it's so bad that it becomes a legitimate question as to, can Josh Pastner do this? Can Josh Pastner take UNLV to the NCAA tournament? And if the answer is no, then you should be looking for a new coach. Do want to point out, I got my Patreon up. If you go to patreon.com/technicallycorrect with Tyler Bischoff, or probably just search it in there, you can find it. A lot of you have asked for it. So Patreon is up. We're going to have some extra content, some bonus content up there at Patreon. So go and find that if you want to get everything that I am putting out. Patreon will be where some extra content is. Go to Patreon, Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff. We're going to start having some bonus content there for you in the future. But coming up next, it's Bischoff's Briefs. The Ravens fired John Harbaugh after 18 years with the Ravens, in which they won a Super Bowl way back in 2012. Baltimore fired Harbaugh. What fun stat that I looked up. Baltimore led the NFL in point differential more often than they had losing seasons under John Harbaugh. It was 4-2. And by the way, those losing seasons were both 8 and 9 in years in which Lamar Jackson had missed a significant amount of games with injuries. Tough business. Prior to this season, they were 35 and 16 in the previous 3 years. And then they went 8 and 9 this year, and he's fired. That's pretty rough because they were very good for the 3 seasons leading in to this year. But I think the biggest thing is everything I just told you is regular season numbers. Postseason wise, the Ravens won the Super Bowl with Harbaugh as their head coach. 13 seasons since then, they have 1 appearance in the AFC title game, right? They haven't made it back to the Super Bowl. They've only had 1 chance to go back to the Super Bowl by playing for 1 AFC title game. They haven't even gotten to that semifinal step in the process. And how much of that is John Harbaugh's fault? Listen, he's a good coach. And winning in the postseason can be random and can be lucky, but you would think, hey, that team won the Super Bowl and then immediately missed the playoffs, by the way. And then you land Lamar Jackson, a top 5 quarterback in the league, and you just have no playoff success. So I get it from the Ravens' point of view. I do. It feels weird because you're firing a terrific head coach who's had a ton of success, and it's very, very easy to look at that and say, well, they're going to be worse. They're going to have a worse head coach and they're going to slide backwards. Very easy to say that. But I think if you're Baltimore, you're looking at it and saying, well, we haven't gone forward. Like we should be a legitimate Super Bowl contender, and we haven't done that with Harbaugh. And so I get it. I don't know if I agree with it, but I do get it. Now, for the Raiders and wanting John Harbaugh, again, I get it. Ton of success. He's won a Super Bowl, right? His only losing seasons are when the quarterback got hurt. That's a pretty valid reason to not have a winning season. Oh, and by the way, they were 8-9. They're still not terrible. They were a field goal away from going to the playoffs this year and being 9-8. I get the appeal. It's the same exact logic that led them to hiring Pete Carroll, though. Same logic. He's a winner. He brings stability. He brings competency. None of that worked with Pete Carroll. None of it did. Would it work with Harbaugh? Probably a better chance because of how bad Pete Carroll's year was, but it's the same logic that got them Pete Carroll. If I were the Raiders, I'm going to interview John Harbaugh, but I don't think I want to hire John Harbaugh because does he match the timeline, right? Pete Carroll came into a situation where they needed to rebuild, and apparently nobody had the authority to tell him, hey, we need to rebuild. I don't know why Pete Carroll didn't realize that if John Spytek's out here saying, well, we knew we needed to rebuild. But Pete Carroll came into a roster that needs to be rebuilt and was saying, we're going to win now, win 10 games. Is Harbaugh going to walk in and say, all right, we're going to rebuild for 2 years? I don't know if he is. He's going to come in and try to win 10 games, and that's not something they need to be trying to do this upcoming season. And then the other part of this, I still want an offensive-minded head coach. You're drafting a quarterback at number 1. I want an offensive-minded head coach. That is not John Harbaugh. Even though, again, I think he's a great coach. If I were in the Raiders position, I don't think I'd be interested in hiring John Harbaugh. Now, we did get some news on coaches that the Raiders are asking to interview. First, Vance Joseph, the Broncos defensive coordinator. Again, defensive-minded head coach candidate. I don't love that. I do love interviewing a coach of a division rival, though. That is funny because maybe you learn something about the Broncos that helps you, but maybe you just distract Joseph enough that he helps the Broncos lose a playoff game. So I don't love the idea of Vance Joseph as their next head coach simply because I don't think they should hire a defensive coordinator or defensive-minded head coach. It is very possible this is just simply a Rooney Rule interview, right? You have to interview so many minority candidates. Vance Joseph is black, and maybe the Raiders don't actually want to hire Vance Joseph, but he fits the Rooney Rule and hurts the Broncos, maybe hurts the Broncos a little bit. The one that I am interested to see, the Raiders also asked, according to Tom Pelissero, to interview Davis Webb. Also a Broncos coach, but he is their quarterback's coach. And yes, they're asking to interview him for their head coaching position. Davis Webb is 30 years old. If you remember Davis Webb, it's probably from college. He played at Texas Tech and then at Cal, threw for a whole bunch of yards. Didn't do much in the NFL, obviously. He's apparently never been a play caller in the NFL. But I saw on Twitter Ted Wynn, who covers the NFL for The Athletic, Benjamin Albright, who covers sports in Denver, and Jesse Palmer, a former NFL quarterback who's a color analyst now. All three of them tweeted out positive things about Davis Webb. He hasn't called plays in the NFL, so there's obviously that big risk there. And I'm not going to pretend to know if Davis Webb is or would be a good coach. I don't know anything about Davis Webb as the coach. He's the quarterback's coach for the Broncos. And by the way, I think the Broncos quarterback's bad. But to me, that's the type of guy the Raiders should be interested in. Yes, if you can get a more solidified offensive coordinator who's got a track record of calling plays, that's going to be better. But I think this is the type of candidate they should be interviewing. And listen, if Davis Webb blows you away, if you become convinced Davis Webb is the next great play caller, hire him. Go find your Sean McVay. McVay was 30 years old when he got hired to be the Rams head coach. Now, granted, he had been an offensive coordinator before that, but that's the type of coach that if you're the Raiders, I think you should be swinging for the fences. And even if it means you're digging down to a quarterback's coach from Denver, I'm okay with that as a thought process. Again, I'm not gonna pretend to think or know that Davis Webb is good, but that's the type of coach that I think is interesting and that the Raiders should be after. So I can't say I'd be on board because I don't know how good he is, but I would be on board with the idea of hiring somebody's quarterback's coach that you just become enamored with. In college football, Anthony Calandria, the former UNLV quarterback, is going to Nebraska. So a Big Ten school for Calandria. Nebraska is replacing Dylan Raiola, who left in the transfer portal. Funny for Nebraska, they thought they had their quarterback. Kenny Minchie, who was Notre Dame's backup, committed to Nebraska, and then the very next day decommitted and signed with Kentucky. So Nebraska pivoted and went to Anthony Calandria. The part that's interesting about Calandria and transferring to a power conference is he's already played it, right? He was at Virginia and was okay. It's not like, oh, he didn't play or was horrible. He was okay. He had okay numbers at Virginia, then was awesome at UNLV and is now going back to the power conference level. Is he better for Nebraska than he was for Virginia? I don't know. I'm going to guess it's coaching dependent. That's going to be my expectation here, that if Matt Rule and his staff at Nebraska can get the best out of Calandria like we just saw Dan Mullen do, then Calandria is probably going to look good for Nebraska. If not, then he'll probably just be okay. He'll probably just be a middle-of-the-road Big Ten quarterback, and, Nebraska just middle-of-the-road Big Ten program. So maybe that's the case. But I do find it interesting when you have the power conference down to group of 5 for 1 year and then back up to power conference. How much better do you think he got in that 1 year playing against Mountain West opponents? In hockey, and we're going to get to the Golden Knights and their win over Winnipeg in just a little bit, but Tomáš Hertl is an Olympian. He will play for Czechia in the Olympics, which means we've got Eichel and Hanifin for the United States, Marner, Stone, and Theodore for Canada, and now Tomáš Hertl for Czechia. Again, no William Karlsson for Sweden. They, I guess, determined he was too injured. So those are your Golden Knights Olympians. I don't think there's going to be any more. I guess there could be injuries between now and the Olympics and guys get replaced. But those are your Olympians for the Golden Knights. I'm excited for the Olympics. I always love the Olympics, and so I'm excited to watch it. Jumping back to the NFL, the Commanders fired maybe Cliff Kingsbury, their offensive coordinator. It was reported as mutually parting ways, which normally means fired, but very strange because Cliff Kingsbury in his first year there, which was Jaden Daniels' first year, they were second in the league in points. And then this year, Jaden Daniels is hurt, plays in only 7 games. They're not good. And they fire Kingsbury or he, I don't know. Every time you hear mutually parted ways, it means fired. But did they really fire this guy because Jaden Daniels got hurt? Is that what happened here? I know there were some reports that he and Dan Quinn weren't on the same page, and Dan Quinn doesn't like that it's a college-style offense, but I don't know, the college-style offense was second in points last season. So what are we mad about? The offense doesn't work when the starting quarterback gets hurt? Well, no shit. That's going to happen to everybody. So I don't know. It just seems weird there. I will say this, even though he's an offensive mind, I do feel like it'd be a terrible head coaching hire for the Raiders, which I've seen out there, not necessarily for the Raiders, but that people might consider him as the head coach. Kingsbury has never been a winning head coach, right? He was at Texas Tech as the head coach, was below 500 there. Somehow, below 500 at Texas Tech led to an NFL job. Was the Cardinals head coach, 9 games under 500 in 4 years as their head coach, did go to the playoffs once, but just he's never had winning teams. And yeah, he's an offensive mind, but I would not want to hire Cliff Kingsbury as my head coach. Offensive coordinator, maybe, right? If the Raiders do hire a defensive-minded head coach, let's say they land John Harbaugh, right? Brian Flores is a name that's thrown out there quite a bit. Then Kingsbury is an offensive coordinator? Sure, right. Yeah, okay, have him call the plays. I don't like that strategy as far as the defensive-minded head coach, but from a standpoint of, okay, you did hire a defensive-minded head coach, Kingsbury as an offensive coordinator, fine. But as a head coach, not interested. Also, the Giants are considering Antonio Pierce for their head coaching position. That's according to Adam Schefter. He said they're going to cast a wide net. And one of those players was Antonio Pierce, who played for the Giants and then got a chance to be the head coach of the Raiders and was horrible. Adam Schefter wrote this, though, in his story. Pierce coached a talent-deficient team in Las Vegas in 2023 and 2024. The hope is that he learned from his mistakes, he knows the inner workings of the Giants organization, and is a natural leader not afraid to make the kind of tough decisions necessary while having the potential pitfalls, navigating the potential pitfalls of the job. Hiring Antonio Pierce when the Raiders hired him was a terrible decision. The Giants doing it in 2026 would be even worse. He didn't display like any ability to be a good coach other than getting the players to like him. Like he very clearly is a personality that the players gravitated to, right? And that has some value. But nothing else that he did as a head coach was valuable, right? We saw it in game management and time management on the field, but there was also the players report card that the NFLPA puts out every year. Players in Antonio Pierce's last year, the only year he started as the head coach, said that the coach's time management skills were bad and that they didn't think they were getting coached enough. The players said they weren't getting coached enough. That's how bad and lackadaisical it was under Antonio Pierce. There's no way if you're the Giants that you could possibly bring him in. I mean, the only thing he did well with the Raiders was he wanted to draft Jaden Daniels, which, yeah, they should have wanted to draft Jaden Daniels, but he won too many meaningless games at the end of a season that they couldn't draft Jaden Daniels because they were picking too low in the draft. So I don't know. We'll see. One last thing here. WNBA says they would, let me rephrase that. The WNBA says they would lose $700 million if they accepted the Players Association proposal. So the WNBA and WNBA PA we're a few days away here from them having an official lockout. The CBA has been extended to the middle of January, but it's going to be up here. And the Players Association made a proposal in which the players would get 30% of the revenue. And that would create a $10.5 million salary cap for teams in the WNBA. And the WNBA is saying, well, we can't do that because we would lose $700 million. Now, there are 15 teams in the WNBA. It's going to go up to 18 in a couple of years. But if each one of them has a $10.5 million cap hit, the math on that is $157.5 million per team in player salaries per year. And again, that's the cap if every team spent to the cap, which we know they wouldn't based on other sports. The WNBA just signed a television deal worth $2.2 billion over 11 years. So what do you can't find a way to make money outside of that? Like, yes, player salaries would account for a lot of that over that course of time, but not all of it. And you don't make any revenue off of fans coming to your games or merchandise sales or sponsorships or anything else. Like, I find it hard to believe they would lose $700 million given that they just signed a $2.2 billion television deal. I just don't believe that to be the case. Maybe the 30% amount doesn't actually make sense. The WNBA is like, well, we're not going to make enough money doing this. But to come out and say we're going to lose $700 million, I just don't buy it from the WNBA. But that's what the ownership side has to say, because if they come out and say, well, we're only going to make $100 million if we do that, then you say, okay, you're going to make $100 million. Sweet. Thanks for the deal. We'll see you next year, and we'll have all of our money. So we're going to lock out. We're probably going to miss games. They're off playing an unrivaled and 3-on-3 right now, so who knows how well this is going to go, but it doesn't appear to be going too well. That is it for Bischoff's Briefs. Coming up next, we'll get into the Golden Knights, who won a game in overtime, a miracle. Quick note for you. I am not going to have a show on Friday. I'm going to call this my first PTO day doing my own show. I am going to Ole Miss and Miami in Phoenix. My sister's going, and her wife and my best friend from high school and college is flying here, and we're going to drive down and go to that game. So we will not have a show on Friday. We'll have a show tomorrow. We'll have a show on Thursday, but no show on Friday. So Golden Knights, they won a game in overtime. They avoided their 6-game losing streak, which would have been the longest in franchise history. Also handed the Jets their 10th loss in a row, which ties their franchise record. That's not a very good team. They came from 2-0 down and won in overtime, something that doesn't happen. The Golden Knights, it's interesting because right now 1 through 6 it is in the Pacific is very, very tight. We're talking, I think it's 5 points, 1 through 6. The Sharks are somehow involved because the Golden Knights, they lose 5 in a row. They finally won a game, but they lost 5 in a row and didn't actually get surpassed by like Edmonton or Anaheim, the teams that have sort of been near the top of the Pacific all year. But all the crappy teams are catching up. So this is like the Golden Knights, again, still in first in the Pacific. That's good. If they lose 5 in a row again, they could very easily be completely out of the playoff picture. They could be passed by like 4 teams in the Pacific Division and fall not just out of the top 3 in the Pacific, but out of the wildcard standing. So it's gotten really, really close. And that win last night, I know we're only halfway through the season and maybe we shouldn't be doing standings watch right now, but with how close it is, like they need to rip off 5 in a row. Is that like that's the reality of it? They need to rip off 5 in a row to kind of counterbalance what they just did and build back up a little bit of a lead. Not necessarily like, oh, they got to be ahead of Edmonton, but just over the San Jose's of the world who could catch you and be ahead of you for a wild card spot, not just a Pacific Division spot. So good win. Any win at this point feels like it's going to be important for playoff seeding, given how tight the division looks right now. But you rip off 5 wins in a row, and all of a sudden it's not quite a concern anymore. Last night, fascinating game for the Golden Knights, specifically for Mitch Marner, because I think there's 3 big points here. The first one is that Mitch Marner was awesome in overtime. Like, big reason they win that game in overtime is because of Marner. He made a terrific defensive play that prevented a shot in the slot for Winnipeg in overtime. If he doesn't make that, Winnipeg might win the game pretty early in overtime. He also drew the penalty in overtime that set up the Golden Knights power play that effectively won them the game. He got tripped by 2 guys. Should have been 2 penalties. Is that allowed? He got tripped by 2 guys on the same play. So he was very, very good in overtime and then had an assist on the power play goal. Granted, it was just a shot. It wasn't like a great pass, but had an assist on the game-winning goal in overtime. Second point, though, he was not that good at 5-on-5. He had like the worst numbers on the team by like Corsi or expected goals or anything like that. Didn't really do a whole lot memorably in that game. But I'm not convinced it's his fault because Mitch Marner is still playing center. That's not his position. If you're new to this, Mitch Marner is not a center. He's a winger. And the Golden Knights have had injuries to their centers that have forced guys to play out of position. Riley Smith did it a little bit. Mitch Marner's done it recently. But Jack Eichel's back, which means the Golden Knights have their best center back. And more importantly, the Golden Knights have 4 centers in the lineup. But last night, at least to start, Marner centered a line with Mark Stone and Pavel Dorofeyev. Second period, Cassidy changed the lines up and he was with Brandon Saad and Riley Smith. But the problem here is that it's not that Mitch Marner couldn't be a good center, because he probably can be. It's not his natural position. He can probably play it fine, though. I don't think the Golden Knights traded for him thinking he was going to play center. Maybe he can do it, though. That's not what this is about. This is about Mitch Marner having to play center because of the poor roster construction that has led to Bruce Cassidy even considering it. Why does this team not have any more centers? Where are the centers in the organizational depth? You know injuries happen in the NHL. We all do. But the Golden Knights came into this year with what? 5 legitimate center options. And so when 2 of them get hurt, when Carlson and Eichel were out at the same time, it means somebody who's not a center has to play center. Riley Smith did it, Mitch Marner did it. The other issue is that of those 5 real centers, one is Brett Howden and one is Colton Sissons. Neither one of those guys is like very good. Neither one is like, oh yeah, we want to see, he might be able to fill in as a second line center, right? And in fact, right now, Bruce Cassidy is choosing to play Mitch Marner out of position at center instead of Howden at center. Because Howden's not this like, oh yeah, he's a great center that we just play at center. They have a 4 center, but he's still playing Marner there. And this is where I think Kelly McCrimmon failed. It's bad roster construction, right? Basically it's saying the roster has to be healthy. Otherwise, we don't have enough centers. And if you remember, Kelly McCrimmon traded Nick Waugh, a center, to Toronto for Mitch Marner. And he did that 2 days before Mitch Marner became a free agent and was going to sign with the Golden Knights no matter what. And if you happen to forget this, the theory at the time, why on earth would the Golden Knights trade for a player who's going to be a free agent in 2 days? It's because Toronto was reportedly going to turn the Golden Knights into the NHL for tampering with Mitch Marner. That Toronto felt the Golden Knights had reached out to a player that was under contract with them to talk about signing a new contract with Vegas when his contract ended in Toronto. So to avoid the tampering charge, the Golden Knights basically bribed Toronto and said, we'll trade you Nick Waugh. Toronto blackmailed the Golden Knights to get Nick Waugh. That was the reporting and the theory at the time. To avoid getting in trouble, they had to trade away Nick Waugh. And so now that comes back to bite. Because Nick Waugh is the perfectly fine third-line center that if you're really good, he's your fourth-line center, and if you have injuries, he's fine to play on the second line. A perfect player for what they would have needed throughout these injuries and could be using right now. But they traded him away for a player that was going to be a free agent in 2 days. That's a bad move from the front office. And now you look at it, Kelly McCrimmon has built an incredibly thin roster. I mean, it's a very, very thin roster, right? Mitch Marner's having to play center. They don't have enough good defensemen that when Theodore and McNabb are hurt, that you even have good defensive pairs out there, right? Jacob Egna's just not good. Like he's just not good. And that's because they don't have depth defensively. And they don't have goaltending depth. Or they didn't, and then they signed Carter Hart, and I don't think he's any good. So Carter Hart is not good. They don't have good goaltending depth. So it's just a very, very thin roster that, yes, if they're healthy, is good and can probably win multiple playoff series. But if they're not healthy, they don't have any depth there. So it feels like a poorly constructed roster where we're going to get to the end of the season, the Golden Knights get eliminated from the playoffs, and Kelly McCrimmon gets to use the injury excuse to say, hey, this is why our season went poorly. I built a better team than this. We just got hurt. When in reality, we all know hockey players get hurt, and not planning for that is poor roster construction, is poor general managing. Last thing I want to end the show with today. The A's got denied a trademark for Las Vegas Athletics and Vegas Athletics, which is incredibly funny that this happens to the A's. There's a story at Gerben Law's website talking about this with some good information on there. First off, the A's are still likely to get these trademarks approved eventually, right? An MLB team that's had the nickname for years across multiple cities, you would think they're going to get that figured out. Specifically, though, the story that they had at Gerben Law's website was highlighting that the A's need to set up some sort of headquarters in Las Vegas, and then they'll have a much stronger case for the trademark. So they're probably going to get it. But they don't have it right now, which is funny because it's too vague. It's like, hey, Las Vegas Athletics just sort of is anybody who's doing sports in Las Vegas would apply to because it's a very vague and broad name. Realistically, the A's should rebrand. They absolutely should rebrand. Like you're moving to Las Vegas and your nickname is the Athletics. It's one of the worst names in sports. No doubt about it, athletics is one of the worst names in all of American sports. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's good. It's a bad nickname. And yes, you've had it for a long time. Does anybody in Las Vegas care? Does anybody here care about the nickname Athletics? Because I don't think anybody does. First off, I don't think people are that excited about the A's coming to Vegas. I love baseball. I'm glad they're coming because I like to go to baseball games. But I don't think as far as branding goes, anybody in Vegas cares about athletics. So you're coming to Vegas. Not a ton of people are that excited about it as is. What can you do to endear yourself a little bit more to this city? Rebrand. Have a new team name that people in this city can get behind. That's something I think they should absolutely be looking at doing. They're not gonna do it. because they're going to tell us that athletics has so much history and people care about it, even though they don't. They're not going to do it. I don't. It might cost John Fisher too much money to do it, but they should. They should rebrand. I don't even know if I like this name. I know I like it better than athletics. Would Las Vegas Diamonds be a good baseball team name? Obviously, you have the playing cards and that tie in, but also a baseball field is a diamond. I kind of like that. I'm sure you could do better. I'm sure there is a better name out there, but Las Vegas Diamonds is a baseball team name. I like it. I'm on board for it. I would also be on board with elephants. If you're unaware, the A's, their mascot is an elephant. They have a logo, not their primary logo, but they have a logo with an elephant on it. I'll be honest, I don't know the history. I think it probably goes back to a circus in, where were they first? Philadelphia? Something to do with the circus. But an elephant logo, an elephant mascot, be the Las Vegas Elephants. There's no tie to Vegas with elephants. That's fine. There's no tie to Raiders, right? And what are we doing? But be the Las Vegas Elephants. If you want to keep some sort of tie to your past and your branding, but have an actual nickname, be the Elephants. I would be on board with the Elephants. I think you could do a lot of fun stuff with being the Las Vegas Elephants. So those are my two suggestions. If you want to keep some tie to the past, be the Elephants. If you want to just do completely new, be the Las Vegas Diamonds. Makes sense from a baseball and a Las Vegas standpoint. But this has been Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff. Again, if you made it to the end of the show, thank you. Go find my Patreon because obviously you like the show. Patreon.com/technicallycorrect with Tyler Bischoff. You can sign up there. We're going to have bonus content coming soon at Patreon. So make sure you sign up so you don't miss any of that. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.